remind everyone that this is a public hearing being recorded and will be rebroadcast on Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964, and online. I ask that you please silence your cell phones and other devices. If you wish to publicly testify, please check the box and sign in at the front door. When it's time for public testimony, I will ask that you please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to a few minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns are heard. This is a hearing for Docket 0196, a hearing regarding school safety and security measures. Certainly as a former teacher and now as a parent of 4 Boston Public School students, school safety has always been top of my mind. A safe community must exist inside and outside of a school building. A safe school environment is more than locks and training, although those are incredibly important. It's also about creating a community that is safe and welcoming. I am very interested to hear about updates on any investments that have been made, especially those in last year's school budget regarding school safety infrastructure. Our students, families, and educators continue to be concerned about school safety, and they have every reason to be. The crisis of violence, the influx of needles and trauma in and around our schools has devastating effects on our school communities, families, and the entire city at large. A safe school environment must also include a commitment to actively addressing and preventing physical, verbal, and cyber bullying. We must create a safer route to school and ensure that school environments are clear of any active drug use and used needles. As students deserve a safe learning environment where they can thrive academically and without fear. That's why I'm looking forward to a thoughtful discussion today, and I thank you all for being here, and I know that your testimony and presentation today will be very thoughtful. We're joined, like I said, by Councillor Matt O'Malley. We also received correspondence from Councillor Ed Flynn of District 2. Councillor Cybi George, please be advised that I am unable to attend today's hearing on Docket 0196. And he will, reminds us in this note that he will review the tape of the hearing when it becomes available and appreciates our attention to this effort. We have a number of panelists that have joined us for the Boston Public Schools and Boston Police to present. I don't know if Councillor O'Malley has an opening statement. We're going to invite, after his statement, 2 of our public to testify. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this. I will be brief. I want to thank our panel and thank the members of the public who we will be hearing from shortly. Obviously, this is an incredibly important topic, and I know one that we are all completely united doing everything we can to make sure that our schools are safe places for our students and for our school communities. It is incredibly sad that we're even having these conversations, but it's unfortunately part of every urban school. Every district in the United States should be having these conversations, making sure we're doing everything and that we have everything planned as well. So thank you. I'm looking forward to the hearing.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. So we have 2 members of the public that would like to testify prior to the panel. And I'd like to invite Bernadette Fossa up to this podium here to my left. And then following Bernadette is Denise Manning, who can join us at this podium to my right. Welcome, Bernadette.
Good afternoon. My name is Bernadette Fossa, and I am the Director of Operations for Paratus Security Group. Thank you, Councillor Cybi George, for the invitation to address the committee today. The docket the Councillor filed for today's meeting is a sensible platform, and Paratus Security has the team, including active duty personnel and psychologists, to work with the school committee on these issues. Of particular concern, we have an obligation as guardians to address the threat of active shooting in our schools. With every incident, whether in a school, business, or a place of worship, more is learned to improve safety protocols. For example, evacuation has replaced lockdown as the optimal threat response. Schools still need to conduct fire drills, and it's recommended they conduct intruder response trainings as regularly. There are multiple variables to consider. Therefore, every school requires an individualized plan which includes evacuation as the primary action. In addition, there is recommended equipment schools should have in place to ensure best practices. The skill sets of Paratus Security Group include decades of experience in crisis control, both domestically and internationally. They are FEMA and Department of Homeland Security Master Exercise Practitioners, Incident Commanders, Sniper Commander, Lead Hostage Negotiator, and SWAT Team Supervisor. With their proficiency, Paratus Security Group offers the following, to name but a few services: risk analysis to evaluate and implement deterrent measures, DHS incorporated principles, structured tabletop discussions for school staff with CEU credits, preparedness exercises conducted and evaluated by professionals, child safety consultants advising on language that promotes feelings of safety and security rather than fear-mongering. Paratus Security is on the trajectory toward teacher instruction and awareness. We all recognize changes facing this committee and school personnel, and I respectfully urge you to meet with the Paratus leadership team for further collaboration. Thank you for your time, consideration, and your service.
Thank you, Bernadette. Denise.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise Manning. I'm an outreach director with Educators for Excellence. Good afternoon, Boston City Council. My name is Denise Manning. I am an outreach director with Educators for Excellence, a teacher-led nonprofit. I want to thank Councilwomen Asabi George and Jamie for attending and speaking with educators on E4E's policy team regarding recommendations to foster positive school culture in schools. I also invite members of the council to speak with the team on the importance of restorative justice practices. Today, I will be sharing testimony written by an educator and member who could not be here today as she is in the classroom at this time. Thank you. My name is Monique Symes. I am a 7th and 8th grade teacher at the McCormick Middle School in Dorchester. I want to thank you for the opportunity to give testimony on the importance of approaching student safety in an equitable way that is student-centered and prioritizes relationship building. As an educator at the McCormick, we are blessed to have a guidance counselor, a dean specifically for 7th and 8th graders, as well as a restorative justice coordinator and counseling staff from Trinity Boston Foundation. Without all of these pieces working together in our school community, we would not be able to support over 95% of our students who are considered high needs. As a teacher, restorative practices in particular has allowed me to contribute to our school's safe and supportive learning environment for my students. I would urge all schools to adopt restorative justice best practices in their classrooms. When it is done well, restorative justice is deliberately woven into all aspects of the school. All educators should invest in restorative justice practices and be trained in how to implement it into their classes. Restorative justice has been useful to students and staff to build community, creating a safer and more supportive environment for learning and for personal growth. I have seen students help to push each other to excel and work through interpersonal challenges. Building authentic community through restorative justice practices makes a difference in students feeling confident and comfortable being in the building. I had a student last year that missed many days of school due to a traumatic experience and felt disconnected from her relationships within the building as a result. When she returned to school, she would go through whole days without speaking to anyone, without saying a word. I noticed this, and because all of that I have learned from our circles, I was able to reach out to her friends and ask them to sit with her at lunch. This allowed her to get back into the habit of communicating and rebuilding relationships with friends, which in turn helped her to reinvest in school. Knowing our students and understanding how to support them is important to the restorative justice practices model. It is also a common practice in our school community to have a community building circle for new students, introducing students to the concept of restorative practices and welcoming them into our community. The circle is not large. Usually there are no more than 10 people, including staff members. Some students are nervous, but all of them have taken the opportunity to share positive and negative experiences that occurred before entering our school community. The circles are an opportunity to share what they need from us and what they need from each other to be successful. As an educator, I want to learn what worries they carry and how we as a community can support them. Also, welcoming students through circles encompasses our values as a school community and allows incoming students to feel part of our school culture. Over the winter, I met weekly with 10 educators from across Boston as a part of the E4E Boston policy team. In those meetings, we developed recommendations based on educator feedback and research around how schools can foster a more positive culture. Increasing access to restorative justice practices as an alternative to punitive discipline practices is one of the recommendations that will be featured in our coming paper this spring. Restorative practices are essential for creating safe and supportive schools. We need students to know that we are here for them, that we have your back. The City of Boston should invest in giving schools and teachers the training and support to implement these practices. It is important that students know from the beginning that they are valued and that we see you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for delivering that testimony.
Thank you.
So it looks like we may have one more, nope, maybe not. All right, John, welcome. I think that you're going to kick off testimony. If you would just introduce yourself for the record, and then we'll get to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is John Hanlon, Chief Operating Officer from Boston Public Schools. Here with me today from my left is Sergeant Detective Tom Sexton, the head of the Boston Police Department School Unit, Kim Pelletreau, Executive Director for BPS Safety Services, Chief Eric Weston, the Chief of Boston School Police, Rick Duraney, Director of BPS Safety Services, and Andrea Amador, Senior Director for Behavioral Health within the Office of the Social Emotional Wellness in BPS. As Counselor Asabi George, as you mentioned, safety to us goes beyond just cameras and locks, and I'm glad that you mentioned that statement, because I think something that you'll hear from this presentation is that safety to us is far more than just cameras and locks and other building features. Certainly there are building features, features to our facilities that are important to make sure that we're continuing to enforce a safe environment in our schools, but we know that safety for our children goes far beyond that, which is why you're going to hear from testimony today from behavioral health. It's why we have representatives from Boston Police Department. It's why we have partnerships with national organizations like Sandy Hook Promise. It's why when we talk about safety services and BPS, it's not just a central office department that has those conversations, but every school leader, every teacher, every educator in our buildings. As I've talked about in this chamber before, I have 4 wonderful children, and they all attend Boston Public Schools, and they do so because we feel safe. We certainly feel that they get a good education there, and we're very happy about that, but we would not be sending our children to Boston Public Schools if it weren't for the safety that we know that they have when they're in the walls of our schools. With that, I'm going to pass it to Kim Pelletreau to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us, everyone. John already went through our introduction, so I just wanted to open up by talking about the agenda very quickly. We're going to start with just a quick overview and org chart for BPS Safety Services. And then we organized a presentation today, given the ask from the council around the 4 stages of emergency response. And we wanted to speak to the content and the work that we do based on those stages. So prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. We're going to put our resources and our information under those buckets as we move forward. So, sorry, I'm playing a little bit of a dual role here. Clicker. Thanks, John. So the Safety Services Organization, Director Duraney, as John just introduced, also has a focus on emergency preparedness. There's myself and Chief Weston as the 3 chief administrators. We also have a Deputy Chief, Francis Johnson, under Boston School Police, and 1 clerical staff. I am going to ask the chief to walk you through just a brief deployment of the officers so we understand what the scope and capacity is. But I would like to take a moment. This was developed over the past 2 years just to outline the mission. The mission of the Department of Safety Services is to provide and maintain a safe learning environment for all students, staff, and guests through daily communication and collaboration with school leaders, families, and partners. So I'm going to hand it off to the chief to talk a little bit about the rest.
Thank you, Kim. As you can see by the org chart, we're broken down into superior officers and patrol officers, 18 superiors, 57 patrol. That is, the number was 75 for this current fiscal school year. We are broken out into officers, 10 officers assigned through K-8 schools, 7 in middle schools, 49 strewn out through high schools, 2 officers, 1 each at the Bowling Building and at the Succeed Boston Building out in Rosendale. And we have 4 officers that are based out of our dispatch office at the safety office at Boston Latin Academy. That's a day supervisor captain, a sergeant who's a dispatcher, a night sergeant who works 3 to 11, and my lieutenant, Kenneth Badgett, who's our intelligence officer and liaison to the school unit. The Deputy Chief, Fran Johnson, was just promoted in September. He was a 30-year veteran of our department, had risen to the rank of captain, and as of right now, doing a great job in his new position. We try to get him out and about as much as possible in the city. We're trying to designate him to be more of a 70% mobile deputy chief, where he's not in the office, because that's where I am dealing with all the other things going on. Fran can be out and about, helping our officers, dealing with the school population, dealing with principals and headmasters to problem solve and do whatever we need to help the schools out with any issues that they have going on. That's pretty much it with the deployment. Obviously, high schools are our bigger ticket items with incidents and whatnot, just because there are more kids there. A lot of our high schools have a sergeant and 2 patrol officers. The K through 8s have 1. The middle schools have 1. So that's how we're strewn out throughout the city. And let me add that we have also mobile units, cruisers that are out on the road. We have 2 that are not tied to any specific school. One of those units is basically in the South End and Roxbury area, and the other is out in the Dorchester area. And we have 4 other mobile units that are based at high schools, but we send them out for service calls to any of the schools in their surrounding area. Myself and Deputy Chief Johnson also have city cars, and we can get out and about also. And that's what we have.
So I'll talk a little bit about our emergency management team. This team is a multidisciplinary team comprised of central office, designated school-based staff, and our citywide partners. Our citywide partners are Boston Police, Boston Fire, EMS, BCYF, the Health Commission, and the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. On our prevention piece, under prevention, each school is under specific mandates supported by the largest safety emergency management team to submit school safety plans annually, establish school access protocols, train staff in the use of AED, CPR, first aid, conduct fire drills, and conduct safe mode internal threat drills. We also expect them to have the active shooter presentation that we put together with the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management and the Boston Police Department. Sign on to work with Sandy Hook Promise in our bully prevention training programs, and adopt a positive climate initiatives comprehensive behavioral health model, or positive behavioral interventions and supports. Also under prevention, the mayor recently gave us that $5 million capital investment focused on facilities, which is a major contribution to prevention district-wide for the upgrades of classroom door locks, which is underway, cameras, exterior lighting, exterior doors, key card access, and that key card access was completed last year. Also, over the last couple years, we've been doing internal safety audits of all the buildings. Presently, we've conducted 95 to date.
So in addition to what Rick just reviewed, I'm going to go back a little to the Sandy Hook Promise and focus on updates around that programming that we spoke about last year when we presented. So as a reminder, last January 2018, BPS formally launched a partnership with the Sandy Hook Promise. This is a national organization founded by the parents, some of the parents of the victims of the Sandy Hook tragedy, with the goal of preventing gun violence or the next violent event within a school by creating awareness, eliminating isolation in schools, and empowering young people to know the signs, to communicate with their peers, and communicate with trusted adults. There's various levels of the programming, such as Start with a Hello, which is suited for grades 2 through 12, and Say Something, which is 6 through 12. This year, we're preparing to launch the Say Something Anonymous reporting system. The process is still in implementation. Thus far, we have, so let me explain SARS a little bit. Let me back up a little bit. So there's the Say Something anonymous reporting system that goes along with the Say Something program, which is school-based, kid-based, and adult-based within schools. The anonymous reporting system comes in the form of a smartphone app, a phone line, and a website. So this allows, very intricate app, allows young people to maintain anonymity and report any concerns that they may have. It's very detailed in the sense that they can download pictures, they can put videos in, they can articulate license plates, they can talk about whomever they have a concern, they could report about themselves, and barring a serious risk to an individual or some other egregious circumstances, that anonymity is never broken. So we're very excited about this anonymous reporting system. We have currently, in November, we trained our administrative team, which entails a few other folks and the folks that you see on this panel. So that is done by Sandy Hook Promise. They come, they have a trainer that goes nationwide. So Neil Larkin trained us. He came back and trained 40-plus school-based staff for the 8 pilot schools that we've identified for the SARS program. Next in line, we're working with BPD to bring Sandy Hook Promise back. We're still answering a few questions with them, clearing up a couple of things, because our major player and our primary recipient of life safety tips in the anonymous reporting system come in 2 categories: non-life safety and life safety. Life safety clearly requires an immediate response, and our immediate responding agency in the city of Boston that's most efficient for these purposes is 911 dispatch under BPD operations. So we're currently working with the deputy superintendent and her staff to clear any barriers, answer any questions in collaboration with Sandy Hook Promise to ensure that we move forward as soon as possible. That will involve scheduling the training, probably 2 or 3 groups of 911 dispatchers across the city, probably a 1-pager for BPD. And then the next stage after that's complete, we'll be going to the 8 pilot schools, training the students, and advising the parents and staff to create education awareness around the app. And when we're prepared to do that, and let me just be clear about that, until Sandy Hook Promise and all the partners, including BPD, are comfortable with the level of training and the clarity around this system, we won't be able to launch. But we are hopeful that it will be coming soon, and we're excited that we're at this stage of the training. I do believe, and some of the evidence shows through Sandy Hook Promise, that empowering young people to this degree, to not have to be that person that says, you know, hey, Mr. Weston, you know, not all kids are going to do that, but they will use things that they're comfortable with and familiar with, and that they know. And so I believe that that's going to empower kids even more, although we know that young people have really good relationships within their schools already. This just gives another pathway for reporting that will hopefully mitigate incidents across the district and ultimately save lives, and at least get young people the supports that they need very early on. In addition to that, SARS programming, we're looking to expand. We had a little bit of a staffing shift with Sandy Hook Promise. Let me educate people a little bit on that. The Sandy Hook Promise pays for a full-time employee on their payroll and embeds them into our district for free for 3 to 5 years. In November of 2018, we lost our BPS coordinator. He just left the agency. The good news is that we have been convening our steering committee all along. Sandy Hook Promise has recently hired a new New England regional director. She'll cover New England and New York. We met with her last week. I thought she was great. She will now coordinate the hiring of our new coordinator, which we are hopeful will come on in April. And so this person, we've got some good candidates so far. We're hoping they'll hit the ground running and will have get their feet wet really quickly and utilize the spring and summer when we have a lot of access, intensive access to school leaders, to line up the next year of programming within schools, including Start with a Hello, Say Something, and multiple others. So we're excited about that. So although we saw a little bit of a delay, I think moving forward, this is a real opportunity to do some really prominent launches and expansion into the next school year of 1920.
So moving into preparedness. Preparedness is a continuous cycle. Under this preparedness, we mandate school safety plans, and they contain specific information informed by school leadership and the safety team to provide a plan when circumstances arise. Part of that plan is to designate a team in every school. They also should and do school evacuation routes and primary and secondary evacuation sites are determined in that plan. They also establish a process for communications in crisis. They conduct their fire and emergency management drills, and they also figure out a way they'll communicate with their entire school community.
So I'm going to talk about response. BPS has a well-developed safety team that responds to critical incidents in the district. The team receives information from a variety of sources, including BPD, Boston Public Health Commission, community partners, principals, students, and teachers. We use the Crisis Go app, which we've talked about before, to track crisis events. We respond to a variety of situations, including transportation issues, community violence, mental health events, facilities issues, or medical events. Appropriate staff are deployed to respond, and one example of a response is threat assessment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our threat assessment process. So BPS's threat assessment protocol is built on national best practices, which includes multidisciplinary teams being trained in schools that include school psychologists, principals, and nurses. It's a two-stage process of screening, and if needed, a full threat assessment is conducted. The goal of threat assessment is not to determine if a student made a threat, but if a student poses a threat. And the end result of threat assessment is to make sure that schools are safe, but also that students are getting the support they need. So based on this age and the circumstances of the threat, we work with Boston BPD Sergeant Detective Sexton to respond to those threats, and he'll talk about that work.
Good afternoon, councilors. Thank you for having me. In conjunction with Andrea and her staff, when we do have threats made at schools, we do have a comprehensive response ourselves. We utilize our intelligence unit and other resources that we have. But most importantly, we make a home visit. We speak to the parents, guardians, whoever may be there, get a better understanding of the social and emotional well-being of that student and whether or not they actually pose a threat, or are they just a teenage boy or girl that's made a statement that's really not what they're all about. So we work hand in hand with Andrea Amador and getting back to her staff to make sure that if we've been to the house and we have concerns, that they will follow up with some wraparound services. We also make referrals to families that may be in need with Youth Connect, which is another program that works closely with the Boston Police Department based out of the Boys and Girls Club. So we try to get as much assistance into a family where a child has shown some type of a statement or actions that would be considered a threat, but in all actuality, what we find out is a lot of these are just juvenile kids that are going through crisis in life, and they have an issue and they have an outburst. And it's not something that we're looking to make arrests in. The whole model of the Boston Police School Unit is intervention and prevention. So a lot of these kids just need a little extra support, and we make our determinations based on that. With that being said, there are other occasions, very few, 3 to be exact, over the last 4 years, where we've actually taken some court action with some students that require that. And that's another attempt through the juvenile court to get them some mandated assistance. Rick Durante mentioned it earlier. About 4 years ago, the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management started the school safety concerns that we have. The Boston Police Department, in conjunction with the school department, and actually most recently the fire department joined us doing some school walkthroughs. We've been doing them for over 4 years now. We're going to continue to do them. We're responsible for not only the Boston public schools, but also the charter schools, the private schools as well in the city. So we have about 200 schools that we have to look after. So we're working hand in hand in that. We will continue to utilize new initiatives, and as far as the active shooter presentations that are being done, active shooter concerns right now, I've been a police officer for 30 years. I would say that the Boston Police Department is now probably more ready than ever to deal with any kind of an active shooter situation citywide, whether it be, God forbid, in a school, but anywhere in the city. So.
So moving on, I'll talk about recovery. Recovery happens after an event where we are establishing security and a sense of safety so that we can return to teaching and learning as soon as possible. To do that, we utilize district resources and community resources that students need for recovery. After a crisis event has happened, behavioral health services supports in the recovery. Supports determined by the nature of events. If the incident exceeds the capacity of the school-based staff, then the district crisis team is activated, which includes the folks that are here with me today. It also includes the behavioral health services staff, and just want to again thank the mayor for giving us additional positions. And these behavioral health services staff help the principal in developing a response plan that includes direct supports to students and families. We spend some time there, help the students in school regain a sense of safety, and then we work with students who need additional supports after the event so that we can ensure that the school returns to teaching and learning. So I have a little bit of data to show you about the work of behavioral health services. So this is year-to-date as of February 2019. Our behavioral health services department, I just want to acknowledge that this is the work of the staff that report to me, the central school psychologist and pupil adjustment counselors. I want to acknowledge that there's additional work being done by school-based staff. But behavioral health services this year, as a team, we've responded to 37 district crisis events. Again, that's when the event exceeds the capacity of the school and they need to call in support, like the members here. Our staff, my staff, have responded to 919 school-based crises. Those are when an individual student or a small group of students are in crisis. We've conducted 302 suicide assessments and 73 threat assessments. And now Chief Weston's going to talk about some school police data.
This data here is good, was generated through the end of February. Crimes against person, there were 433 written incident reports by school police officers, 186 threats, 11 of which were coded as social media threats, 169 sick injury reports, 532 crimes against good order. Total number of incident reports through February were 2,417. The social media threats, we kind of thought there'd be a little more than that, but it's just the way my incident database system is a little kind of outdated, so it doesn't filter a lot as correctly as it should. But most of the threats like we have of the 186 are be students say, "Yo, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to beat you up." There's some sort of threat to harm, but not oh, I'm going to come and shoot up the school, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's all encompassing with any kind of threat like that.
Could you just clarify what crimes against good order means?
Crimes against good order will include fights, affrays, threats, disorderly conduct, disturbing school assembly, indecent exposure, and other crimes against good order, which there are hardly any of those, but those are the main categories.
Thank you very much. I think that's your presentation there. I appreciate the attention to detail and sort of the comprehensiveness of this presentation. In the meantime, we were joined by Council President Andrea Campbell. It wasn't referenced in this presentation, but I think that they are involved in this work, and that's the best clinicians that are affiliated with Boston Police and Boston Medical Center. Can we talk a little bit about the role that they might play in responding to a crisis at a school or a student in need?
Sure. Andrea, you want to talk a little bit? Yes.
Yeah. So I work very closely with the BEST team. One of the things we have in the district is the School-Based Mental Health Collaborative, where each month I pull together all of the mental health providers that are providing support to our kids, and we meet, and the BEST team has been a longstanding partner in that collaborative. So that we can strategize together. For example, right now, Boston Police, BEST team, and BPS are working on a grant, so we can start to collect data specifically about 911 calls and the use of BEST teams. So when a student is in emotional crisis and the school needs additional support, they will call the BEST team. The BEST team's increasing its capacity, and I think Sergeant Detective can talk about that as well. So they'll come to the school, do an evaluation. If the child ends up being taken to the hospital in an ambulance, they'll meet the child at the emergency room and do an evaluation. The reality is most kids end up coming back to us because of issues in hospitals and beds. And so they bring the kids, help us support the students once they return. And that could be either behavioral health services staff supporting the students or community mental health partners. So we have 25 community mental health partners that provide direct or allied services to students. They're also part of that collaborative I mentioned. And they're in approximately 80 schools providing mental health services. And Sergeant Detective Sexton also works with the BEST team.
Well, we do, yes. So there's some grant writers for the police department now that are trying to get a dedicated BEST team assigned to the school unit on the day shift. We do have them quite extensively on the evening shift, but sometimes we do have a bit of a delay during the days when kids need them. So we're in the process. I was just in a meeting the other day. We're going to meet again with Andrea and the grant writers at BPD under the direction of Deputy Superintendent Stratton to try to hire a full-time clinician from the BEST team who specializes and is more focused on juvenile issues. And so that's what we hope to do going forward. So we have somebody.
He had brought that up at our hearing in December on mental health and suicide prevention, the need for a BEST clinician within your unit.
Yes,
That's really
it's
important.
sometimes difficult, especially if, you have a child at 7:30 in the morning that's having a bit of an emotional distress, and, the BEST team isn't really on duty at that point in time. So it will be a welcome thing if we can make this grant come through.
Yeah, I appreciate, and any support that you need from us here on the council, let us lend
I'll
our
pass
voices.
it along to the deputy. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. So I'm going to, I think I've used up my first round of questions, so I'm going to go to Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to tick through these. So thank you all. It was a very, very comprehensive presentation. I appreciate it. I know the good work that you all are doing in your teams. So Chief Weston, how many officers are stationed at a school full-time?
We have 75 officers
At how many schools?
at basically 43 schools.
43 schools, okay. And those are full-time, so they're there for school hours, typical school hours.
Yes.
And you mentioned you've got some in the mobile units, at least one on a 3 to, or maybe a handful on a 3 to 11 unit, okay. And is there any desire to grow that number?
Always.
Okay. You're shaking your head no.
Oh, no, sorry, Counselor, I was shaking my head. No, did you say 3 to 11 shift?
Yeah,
No, they're,
No, there's-
Just general numbers.
yeah, well, you mentioned
Oh, I'm
there's
sorry.
one, unless I
Sorry.
had it wrong, there's at least one officer who's scheduled 3 to, which makes sense, given after-school, just have someone on call.
Right.
Okay, so we met, as we're entering budget season, it's good to know that that's an ask to grow. And I assume you must have, like many public safety forces, a fairly high attrition rate.
Yes, we actually have hired a good amount of people over the last 2 years. We were losing people, gaining them back. We have a core of veteran officers that have been here for a long time.
Yeah.
But now the gap is widening, and now we had a lot more new hires over the last 2 years that we're hoping to retain as we go forward.
And forgive my ignorance, is it like a one-off hire and then specialized training, or do you wait to do a class? I guess given the size of the unit.
With the size, we try to replace as fast as we can.
Yeah, okay. Rick, you talked about the $5 million sort of facility investment last year, which went to locks, doors, cameras, et cetera. And then part of that was the safety audit as well. I know you've done I think 95 out of 120 some odd schools.
Right.
Did you find any sort of top line response from those safety audits?
No, it's typical questions. We're trying to get the climate of the schools. We're trying to get issues that each school seems to have. And again, a part of it was the doors, locks, keys issue.
Yeah.
And this capital investment is really helping out those problems.
Will that $5 million be enough to make sure, sort of just the minimum, there'll be secure doors for the schools? I assume not the classrooms as well. That would probably be north of $5 million.
Those are what we're working on, the classroom doors.
Classroom doors,
Right,
okay.
Right,
And-
we're changing all those locks. And I think we were given, John can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were given $2 million this year out of that, and we're gonna, in July, we'll get the rest of it to complete the project.
Yeah, why don't I'll jump in, Counselor. The capital funds that we had available for this project were $2.5 million.
Yep.
Last year, the mayor doubled that to allow us to have $5 million. That's the kind of line item that we expect to continue to see in the capital plan for many years to come, because we'll continue to have security needs across our schools, things that come up year to year, or the need for replacement or repair of some of these fixtures within our buildings. However, this excess flow of capital into this project will allow us to be able to handle the classroom door locks across the district, in addition to, we hope, being able to do camera systems, PA systems, those kinds of pieces, many of which have already begun.
Okay, thank you. Kim, you mentioned about the anonymous reporting system. So that's preparing for launch. That's not up and running yet?
Nope, it's not up and running yet. In fact, we have ongoing calls. We have a call this week about it with the Sandy Hook Promise folks. It will take some time to get BPD all squared away and get their training complete, and then the stage of training the 8 pilot schools, the young people, and advising the parents. So while I'm hopeful, we were hopeful that it would happen this year, the timeline's a little unclear.
Yeah.
I think at the latest, it'll happen in the fall, but that's based on the training timeline that we put together with Sandy Hook Promise. So I think you can imagine how critical it is. We're looking at approximately 5,400 students being trained, about 900 staff. The data from Sandy Hook Promise is when you train that many, about 6% on the high end will report a life safety tip, which for those numbers is about, the tips in general will be about 348, and half of those will be life safety, will be 174.
Okay.
So you can, some of the concerns are, is this a capacity issue for 911? Is it a capacity issue for EMS? How do we manage it, et cetera? So we've spent some time answering a lot of those questions collectively, and we are confident that our own capacity, particularly in the initial stages, that's why we're only doing 8 schools and not trying to roll it out district-wide.
Understood, understood.
So we want to be very certain that we're ready to roll out, because once you have to respond, you have to respond.
Great. No, I
But I
appreciate
think we'll
that.
have more capacity staff-wise as
Okay.
we move into the fall.
Excellent.
And
Thank
Counselor,
very
if you
much.
wouldn't mind, I'll just add to that Kim and her team have done a marvelous job working with other cities, other districts that have rolled this out as well.
Yeah.
We're very lucky it's a national partnership, the Sandy Hook Promise.
Yeah.
And so we're able
And
to
if-
learn from the
if-
lessons that they've had from other districts as well.
Appreciate it. And who, that funds a position currently? Sandy Hook?
It is, we're in the process of hiring a new person. Yeah, it's a full-time coordinator, and Sandy Hook Promise pays for them.
For how long?
3 to 5 years, you can extend an MOU as well.
And then would we be looking to make that a permanent position after the fact?
I think sustainability is always going to be a question, but if we do the work correctly in the district, schools should be able to sustain the programming on their own with focused people in the district. Andrea and I now co-lead Sandy Hook Promise, so I think we'll learn more about that capacity as we move forward when we're talking about 125
And
schools.
Who's going to monitor sort of the text and the threat, the anonymous reporting system, the new individual, or you two?
So
Or both, or all
the
three.
initial report goes to a remote crisis center that's staffed 24/7 by trained crisis counselors. It's actually in Florida, right? So the
Okay.
tip gets vetted there for safety or life safety. If it's life safety, then it would get reported immediately to 911 dispatch and BPD. And then during school hours, this team, among others, each school that's participating has an identified team as well that would be alerted. So we see a lot of this running the same way this team always interacts together during the day, particularly in school hours. An incident pops up, it's reported, it goes to safety services, BPD's advised, and I deploy through communications for operational superintendents and additional supports at the school. It's the off-school hours partly that make this app so attractive, because we're able to glean information when we don't have kids in front of us and hopefully respond in the same way. Not that we don't do that now, because there's been a Sunday night when I've asked Sergeant Sexton to send someone over and kick down someone's door because they're allegedly in their house about to commit suicide. So know that that work already happens, but this will give us a lot more structure to it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you all.
welcome.
That's all for now.
Thank you. Counselor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi-George, for calling for the hearing, and thank you, each of you, for all of the work that you guys do. It's not easy work, so I appreciate the work you do. Just following up on some lines of questions from Council O'Malley. So just going back, Chief Weston, to his question around, the need for more officers at the school level. Is it a cost barrier? Is that the biggest
I'm not sure about that. I mean,
Okay.
we try to do our best with the 75 that we've had. I mean, I've been on this job for 34 years, and at times we had more officers, at times we had less officers, and we're still doing the same work every day.
Because I only asked, as a group of schools in the Grove Hall area of my district, and I know the folks here and others in administration have been on the ground at those schools, the Frederick and the Burke, really trying to help them with incidents happening in the community. And sometimes it can be really hard if something's going on and they have to call to get someone to show up, versus I imagine if you have someone there consistently or in the area. So clearly from the school leader perspective, and we've been at a lot of meetings where some of them are yelling and screaming because they're just so frustrated, they'd like to see someone more on a full-time basis. So I'm always wondering, is it resources, meaning to invest more, to get more officers, to increase the number of officers so that we have more at the school level, so we expand from 43 schools to more? So it was just a question. Just sort of looking at all of you guys. You're
I
like,
think
more officers, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, from our lens, a big piece of this, and I think it should be true in every urban school district, that over 50% of what we do in safety services should be prevention, intervention oriented. To that end, if you look at those focus schools in that meeting in Grove Hall, several of them already have full-time officers assigned. I think that BPS does a really good job working with school-based staffs on collective interventions and preventions and tapping into resources that we have across the district. That's not to say that every department of operations wouldn't use and use wisely additional monies, but that goes for other departments as well. What I would say is our young people now are growing up in a time that I didn't know when I was growing up. The level of trauma, the exposure to social media, the issues that they're dealing with in some of their homes, the neighborhood violence, the unpredictability of it. I've worked in Boston for a very long time with young people, and it will never be the same in this country or globally how young people grow up. So it's inherent and incumbent upon a school system, and other agencies in the city to make adjustments for prevention and intervention and the work that needs to be done at a ground level, and that's elementary and up. So I am confident when I say that those conversations are happening with interim Superintendent Laura Perrell and with John Hanlon and with other folks around the table, because we have to be able to measure that and our capacity to do that work at the same time that we're saying, do we physically need more people? And so know that the focus for school police is also to be a productive and positive part of the school leadership team, and that means the threat assessment team, that means the safety team, and we want folks moving around this district, and that's why Chief has been very strategic about the capacity we have in mobile units to increase our visibility and our presence, not only for physical security, but to get in and see the school leader and say, hey, what do you need today? Are there things that I can help you with? How's your school access protocol going? What can we do? Do I need to ask Rick to come by? Do I need to ask the chief to come by? So we're also being very creative in a prevention, intervention oriented lens to increase our capacity. I think we haven't done that in the past, not because people don't want to, but just because we just haven't adapted yet. So there's a lot of that work going on too. But, I know that the chief and at least the deputy chief has attended those meetings, and as have I in different capacities and will in the future.
Yes,
And there's
thank you.
multiple schools, not just BPS schools, and perhaps Sergeant Sexton has a little bit of information he wants to add, because this is an issue that requires our entire community, our parenting community, our nonprofit community, our business community. I think school leaders are in a really tough spot with what they have to combat that happens outside of schools.
Very helpful, thank you.
I just wanted to add,
Yes.
our officers are in a kind of a difficult position in that, in an ideal situation, they're there to protect the school from outside influences. When we talk about active shooters, we talked about intruders in buildings. Our main focus should be to keep everyone in that building safe. But we also have to deal with what goes on in the school. And we know that there's, misbehaviors, that we have incidents, obviously. And, anything that happens out on the street of Boston, we find happen in schools also, unfortunately. So our officers are kind of running that fine line of, I got to be the policeman and I got to protect everyone from the outside. But inside this building, I'm trying to develop relationships with the students and with the staff so that we can talk to kids on the same wavelength of, discussions of the day. Hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. I'm not your enemy. come to me if you have any problems. So they're really going through a fine line of how to deal with all these situations. I think they do a pretty good job of doing that.
Yeah,
They do an incredible job.
Yeah.
They're really part of the school community. Many of them are well vested with the kids, and when we come in as the Boston Police, you know, we know who to go to. It's the secretaries, the school police officer, the principal, get them all involved, but they do incredible work. And back to the meeting and some of the issues there,
Yeah.
the majority of those issues, as you probably are well aware, are middle school kids, after school,
Yeah.
at dismissal, kids being kids, and sometimes it just gets out of hand, so.
No, and I appreciate, again, you know, all that you guys do and how you show up at these meetings and the response. It's not easy work. So just, oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah,
And
I
I
just
can
wanted
come back in
to
the
sum
next
up a
round.
little bit and come back to your original question. We believe wholeheartedly that the children attending Boston Public Schools today are safe, and we will continue to do everything that we can to keep them safe, whether it's my children or anyone else's children who attend the schools. It may not be that you're seeing an increase in the number of school police officers, but there's been a dramatic increase in the number of resources that have been thrown toward this effort over the last few years, whether it's facilities investments or BPD support or external partnerships or the increased awareness around the need for behavioral health supports. I think the investment in additional school psychologists over the last year was a tremendous benefit to all of our combined efforts to make sure our children are safe. So it doesn't come down to just a number of school police officers. It comes down to how much we're leveraging the entire ecosystem around our children to make sure that they're safe. And there's been a tremendous effort around that in the last few years that I think we're all very proud of.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell. And we'll certainly be advocating for additional support services through our budget process, which we're about to start. And I do want to say on the school police officer piece, I taught for 13 years at East Boston High, and the school police officers that were there and still there today, really just, not just a part of that school community and really a resource for the kids and teachers alike. When we talk about active shooter, and although it is very unlikely to have an active shooter incident in any one of our schools, we know that it's more and more likely, statistically speaking, every time an incident does happen. What does active shooter training look like in our schools, and understanding there may be some differences between what happens in our elementary schools compared to our high schools?
Well, the training's all the same. We talk to them about, you know, being safe. We talk to them, no matter where they are.
And who's them? Students, teachers,
No,
adults?
we work with the teachers, the adults,
Okay.
right? The adults in the school. We talk to them about being safe, not only in their school building, but wherever they might be. It's a great presentation that the Boston Police Academy group does. We teach the run, hide, fight. And again, you know, you'd love to run and get away. That's probably the best thing you could do. But the structure of our buildings and the way they're set up, a lot of that probably will not happen. So we talk to them about being safe in their classrooms, where to go, what to do, how to do it. And then obviously the worst case scenario is that they approach the intruder, or the intruder approaches them, and they have to fight. And we talk about that. And it's great because we talk about it in their space. We talk about, they have questions about their particular space that we sometimes even walk through and talk with them about. So they feel better when they come out of the presentation that they can do things. You know, it's about planning, it's about situational awareness, knowing what their space is, knowing what it looks like, how to set it up. So they're prepared. And I think it's gone very well over the last 2 to 3 years. We've been doing this for over 5 years, and it just seems to get better. And the teachers and the staff really appreciate the discussion that we have with them.
I would say, I would add to that, the last professional development I took as a teacher at East Boston High was the active shooter presentation. And as a teacher, we don't always appreciate professional development. We refer to it as teacher detention. And for the 2 hours that we had this presentation, every adult, because it's teachers and other adults in the building, were fully engaged in the presentation, certainly made me more aware of what I could and would do as a teacher. Also as just a civilian, because the advice given was also applicable outside of the building. But it also made me more aware about that lock conversation. In school safety, often we talk about school locks because we realize as a teaching group that although our classroom doors could lock, in order to lock them, it had to be from the outside. And the last place you want to be during an incident like that is in the hallway, locking your door. And that sort of led to some of the conversations that I've had with you over the last few years about classroom locks. And, you know, it's critical. It's so important to do these trainings and share that information. And it makes us more aware of where the pitfalls are, where the weaknesses are for not only you guys, but for teachers, because we have to think more proactively and thoughtfully about how we would respond if an unfortunate incident, awful incident happens in one of our schools.
And that's where a lot of the conversation came from, you know, the discussions about them feeling unsafe about going into the hallways, the connecting doors and not knowing if that other classroom door was locked, if an emergency happened, if the teacher happened to be out of that room. So letting them know that we're doing this work, repairing the locks, replacing the locks, they're very appreciative of it.
Yeah.
So
And
thank
the
you.
teacher piece is important, but my own kids went through one of their sort of lockdown quiet drills, whatever they call them, and he sort of made a joke after school. This was this current school year. He says, well, I would have been dead. I happened to go to the bathroom during the drill. And I thought, you know, we share this information with teachers, but we have to make sure we get this information to our kids. So when my kid is in the restroom during the drill, what is he supposed to do? And how do we share that information with our young people, with our students, regardless of age? Because at any given time, someone is in the restroom or someone is roaming the hall, unfortunately, because
Right.
kids do roam hallways during, you know, if there were something really to happen. How do we share that information if we're just doing the drills with teachers?
So that should also be part of the practice that they do, talking about whether if they're outside the classroom, to get into the nearest classroom and be part of that team or that group. So, you know, we'll make sure that we press that conversation with the teachers when we do have these presentations. And we'll talk about it with the principals when we have the ALI this year. But they should be talking to them about that and letting them know that they need to get into the closest classroom as soon as possible. And if they can't, to get into a safe place and secure themselves. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah. And then I know Kim and John.
Sure. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to add that we encourage schools to sign up every 2 years. There's a, you know, staff, we have turnover with staff, we have updates to the presentation. We work really closely with BPD, with Sergeant Sexton and the Academy that take the lead on facilitation. And staff also walk away understanding what the Boston police response is and what the capacity is as they move through the day and their different shifts. I think that's really valuable information for them to have. And then we will encourage, Rick and I will go back, and if we need more people, we'll ask them to come with us from our staff, and we'll be there when they do a safe mode drill. And then we'll give them direct feedback, or we'll go check the rooms ourselves and see how, you know, we can help support them in doing things a little bit differently. But we encourage them to do those drills in transition to see how they respond so they can debrief and learn and teach the young people from that.
Yeah, I'd also add training substitute teachers who come into our district regularly, that it's part of the training that we're
Yeah.
doing for them.
And-
And any traveling personnel, that they're
Yep.
sort of more aware of the buildings that they're spending time in.
And I want to take a moment to emphasize part of that training, and we talk about this, we talk about the importance of empowering staff during this presentation, but this is also heavily about school access. How do you empower staff to take control of their own space, their own school? And that means conducting threshold inquiries, but it starts at the very basics. Wear your school ID. Make sure that everybody has one. If you don't have one that opens a door, you have a substitute teacher coming in that's not going to get one, make one with your school logo, with a lanyard, and they have to wear it when they are in your school. It tells young people that you belong there. It tells staff that you belong there. And then we have a very detailed superintendent circular, SAF 12, that dictates how school access is done. And so part of our daily visits to schools are around supporting them in maintaining that protocol and making sure that they're implementing it, because the inquiries about who you are and why you're coming to this building need to happen when visitors are outside the building, not when they get inside the building. So there's a lot of emphasis based on incidents that have happened that we base the updating of that circular on, and we emphasize that during that presentation as well.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. What I just wanted to add is a couple different points. We knew that there'd be conversation today related to active shooter situations and what we do to prepare our schools for those situations. And what I'm about to say should not in any way, shape, or form be taken as trying to belittle or marginalize the importance of those conversations and that work. But I do want to remind the council and others that the actual number of active shooter situations in this country has dropped in the last decade or 2 decades, not risen. It seems to have risen because of the media exposure to those incidents that have come up, whether it's Columbine or Sandy Hook or Stoneman Douglas. But when we look at national research with national experts we work with on a regular basis, we see that there's actually been a decline in those situations, not a rise. That does not mean that we're not preparing our schools for them. I only say that to offer an ounce of peace of mind for people, because people tend to think that there's this dramatic increase in the number of these, which we're not actually seeing from research. The second point that I would raise is it's extremely important to prepare our schools and their teams for active shooter situations, but we also try to do so that we're not allowing them to then block out the potential of other safety incidents which can occur in their buildings, which we know can cause much more safety risks for them and their students than active shooter situations. And so we work with our teams across a broad array of safety incidents that come up, whether it's active shooter situations or external threats, which happen much more often in our schools, where we lock our schools down so external threats can't get in, to people coming into the building, not as an active shooter situation, but as someone who's just deranged and doesn't, really shouldn't be there at the time. So there's a lot that goes into these efforts with schools beyond active shooter.
Great. Thank you. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, and I apologize, I had to step up for a call, so you may have answered this, in which case I will just review the tape. But Chief Weston, you had gone through sort of the, in the last slide, there were 11 social media threats, I think you had said, if I have that correct?
Correct.
Which I think you had mentioned in your remarks. You thought that was low. As you were saying that, I whispered to the chair, that seems low as well. It's just particularly, well, I'm sure it's a good sign, but also what's always one of the chilling affects anytime we see one of these mass school shootings is there's always a social media, quite often a social media post that's pointed to. So can you talk a little bit about how you monitor it? Well, how do you identify those? Does someone have to make you aware of it first?
It's usually somebody from the school makes us aware. Somebody has seen it, has told the principal, a teacher, somebody. It's gotten out there.
Yeah.
I know that some of my own officers are on Facebook, and they can see things too. And if they see something that they don't like, they'll make a notification, and Boston Police get involved right away.
Yeah. Fewer and fewer kids are using Facebook now, though, so it's why we have to be really nimble in this.
I would
We'll have
just,
to move them on to the next.
I would add that it comes from so many different places. It comes from other young people, it comes from school staff, it comes from parents. So as soon as it rises to our attention, we try to break it down. If it comes internally from BPS email, that helps us because we can track it back. But it is, we're not thrown by this data in the sense that it was more of an exclusive social media threat, and that's why it was documented the way it was documented. We certainly know that there is much more social media involved in several of these incidents that involve violence in schools, depending on the age.
Okay, you mentioned the software was outdated as well. The chair just reminds me.
It's not even really software. This was a kind of a homegrown.
Do you mind just into the microphone? Please, thank you.
This is like a homegrown incident database that the school department kind of developed for us for, years and years and years ago. We just have not upgraded lately, so we're.
Does any such software exist? And again, I want to.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of incident software that exists that we should look at.
Seems to me it would be a worthwhile investment from the
We're
city.
also working with the director of OIIT on assessing the system and looking at an upgrade, what it would cost. Can we do it internally? Do we have the capacity at BPS to upgrade? Do we need to look at something different? What makes the most sense? Just so that we can do we can be looking at the proper data and we can have access to things that is as accurate as possible. It's just a little archaic at this point. We can extract, it just takes a little bit more time, but something we're certainly aware of.
Yeah, okay, great. Please.
As far as a social media threat, we had one a couple of years ago directed towards Brighton High School, the Brighton Tigers, the website. It was notified that there was going to be a school shooting. It took the Boston Police Department, the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, to track down that it was actually Brighton, Utah, who are also the Brighton Tigers. It was a football player on their team that had actually made the threat. So It's bizarre how some of these social media threats pan out, but.
Could you notify, I assume,
Oh,
the
I was on the
Brighton,
phone with
Utah
Brighton,
Police
Utah,
Department?
and, you know, we were able to put, you know, they ended up taking some
I
action
hope
out
they
there.
knew about it. I hope they're the first
They
thing.
didn't, because everything was coming to
Wow.
Boston and Brighton High School, so they didn't know anything about it until we notified them. So
Wow.
it's a matter of law enforcement speaking.
Sure.
We've had cases that have taken me down to the Carolinas on different school threats and stuff that, you know, initiated here, but ended up really not being here, so.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. Social media just makes it difficult to track.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. Thank you. And then for my last one, I think, Andrea, you were talking about the threat assessment protocol, as well as Sergeant Detective Sexton. Can you just sort of, either of you or both of you, walk us through what a low-level threat would look like as opposed to a medium to high threat? Like, you could give an example, hypothetical, obviously, without betraying any confidence.
So a low-level threat happens when a student makes a threat and then immediately rescinds the threat. So for example, a kid's on the playground and he makes a threat against a peer, and they get inside and they're separated and they start to calm down, and he apologizes and indicates that it was just said out of anger. So low-level
But would that
threats-
threat be something like, I'm going to beat you up, or something more, you know,
It could be
larger?
a variety of different actions the student's suggesting he's going to take. But in terms of characteristics of low-level threats, they're threats that the person had no plans beforehand. They're reactive and then immediately withdrawn. There are also plans, low-level threats are plans that don't have a possibility or realistic event. So you'll see after something tragic happens in the community and the nation, and it's on the news, the kids will say that incident that they're going to do that. So after 9/11, for example, a student said he was going to fly a plane into a building. That's a low-level threat because he doesn't actually have the ability to do that. So that's low-level. Medium and high-level threats, there's actually some research coming out right now that we should just group them together as threat, because it really doesn't matter if it's medium or high. We're going to do a full threat screening and get more information to figure out, does the student actually pose a threat? So we're not trying to figure out if he or she made a threat. We've kind of documented that. We want to figure out, by doing that threat assessment for middle and high, do they pose a threat? Do they have access to weapons? Do they have a history of violence? Do they have a peer group, or have they been excluded? Have they been disciplined recently or been in a fight recently? These are all indicators. The age, what was said, the context are indicators that make a threat medium or high. And then we do a full screening with that multidisciplinary team. And the end goal is to, A, make sure the school's safe. And Sergeant Detective said that the majority of threats, really, there was no intention to actually do that. It was said in anger. And so after we've conducted the threat assessment, we work together on many cases to figure out what help does the child need. But if it is a high-level threat and we believe that there is danger, then we obviously are turning to Sergeant Sexton. So I'll turn to you, and you can talk about access
So
to weapons.
we deal with a lot of them. I mean, making arrests is not the best way to go when you're dealing with 13 and 14-year-olds, so we try not to do that. So it's with this multidiscipline approach and getting some mental health involved and Youth Connect for the families, we're seeing better results. Again, if I was to arrest every kid that said he was going to shoot somebody at school, would have a big, long line of students lined up here. Kids say what they are. We have to remember to understand that 13, 14, 15-year-old, you know, young kids going through a lot in life, and puberty and everything else going on in their brains. So it's our approach to do the intervention and the prevention. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I've got 3 people now in court, students that are concerning, and we monitor them. We work with Andrea Amador's staff to check in on them. A couple of them now, a few years ago, they made the threats, and we've had one recently that we're dealing with. And again, it's a family that needs a lot of support. So.
Well, I'll just say in closing, I, just thinking the course of this hearing and sort of preparing for it is that I was a sophomore in college when Columbine happened, so I'm sort of right on that cusp where I had the luxury of not being in high school or obviously elementary school when school shootings seemed as not only prevalent, but it was inconceivable to me, and I think many of you guys as well. So it's so important, and I know you all know this, that both were prepared, you all are supported and have the resources you need. You know, while having these drills, not scaring kids, having that right balance, and it's incredibly important, obviously, and I appreciate all of you for your work on this. It's sad that it is this important. It's sad that we're having this conversation, but it's vital that we do so. So thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Campbell.
Thank you, Counselor. So just, this is more about information. Can we get a list of the schools where there is a school-based officer? Is it also possible, Andrea, to get a list of the organizations that participate in the collaborative? Because as cases come to us, it's always great to know which organizations are available for us to refer folks to, so that could be really helpful to many of us. In terms of just numbers, and we're always talking about how there aren't enough physicians, clinicians, and that support staff available to every school leader in every school, but what are the numbers currently of those, whether clinicians, psychologists, right, which is equally important to school-based officers, obviously, given this conversation, that are available at the school level? And then what's your numbers look like at the central office to be able to make up for any gaps?
So all school psychologists, almost all school psychologists are part of my department. So there are 75 school psychologists in the district. 69 of them are part of my department, and they provide a range of prevention, intervention, and intensive services to all schools. In addition to the staff that I have, there are a variety of school-based staff that are hired by the principal, supervised by the principal, and work in one building for the principal. And that includes folks like guidance counselors, clinical coordinators, social workers, and school counselors. They're in a variety of schools, typically middle or high schools, where the principal has used part of their weighted student formula to purchase their own staff, and then the mental health partners that I mentioned. Again, we have approximately 80 schools that have a mental health partner at least one day a week. And
Is there a list of the schools that have that school-based support, whether a guidance counselor, clinician, however the school leader deemed appropriate for their school? Is there a list of the schools that have that?
Yeah, just allow me to clarify that the folks that report to me are based in schools. They're not obviously with me in central office, so each school psychologist on average supports 2 or 3 schools. So though they're centrally deployed, they're based in schools. They all have an assignment. There's a school psychologist, Christine Haley, is Boston High, and that's her assignment. So I just
It would be
wanted
great to
clear.
know, I guess, then, which of the schools, what they have available to them. Sure. That would be really helpful.
We can get you that information.
And then back to the social media piece, all of us are in schools within our district or the schools outside of our district. And my biggest neighborhoods, of course, are Dorchester and Mattapan. In speaking to students or teachers, school leaders, but particularly the students, this comes up quite a bit. When you have a student maybe after a conversation follow you down the hall and talk about social media, don't forget about social media. There's a lot going on social media. Do we do any trainings in schools with young people, with staff around appropriate use of social media, how to report something that feels funny to you, just any training whatsoever with respect to social media?
Yeah, do you want to talk about OIT?
Yep, so, specifically, if you want to talk about what Mark's doing.
Yeah, so the Department of Information Technology has developed a social media awareness training for students to make sure they're aware of both their expected conduct and then how to be safe from predators. And that they had a big launch week where they got that out to schools, and there are materials on the website. I don't know if you want to add to that, Kim, but.
I was going to say, in addition to that, we are looking to work with a partner that has done some presentations in the past, and at least one at the Frederick out of the DA's office. I understand she does an amazing presentation about social media awareness, so we wanted to tap into that resource. I think, particularly for me, this is the type of, not that it doesn't need to be in all the schools, but we really need to hit the middle schools. We need to hit these kids in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then there's an accountability as you move into high school about how you use these tools, because it will just escalate as they get older. And I think building in these baseline understandings of what's allowable and what's not allowable, and what's safe and what's not safe, and how we use it and when we use it is so important. So we'll continue to look at additional resources as well.
In any way we can advocate from where we sit to try to bring the social media training piece. And there are some programs or departments that do it really well, and some schools have taken advantage of that program, which is great. But like you said, it's I think so important. So would love to continue the conversation on that. And why I even brought it up, the Frederick in my district, that came up in a separate conversation with the principal and some of her teachers, and how effective that training was. I guess my last question is, I was at the hub this morning, the new hub model that's in JP in East Boston, E13 in East Boston, where you have officers, including the captain, sergeant, along with providers, all at the same table. It's in partnership with Mass Housing and BPD, all at the same table doing these individual case reviews and really trying to grapple with the trickier cases, most of which don't need a police response, need a resource response. And so I just went to see it in action. Someone from BPS was there, I think, as of recent. But of the maybe 20 cases they reviewed, maybe a third had school ties. And some were, a young person who was at Charlestown High, for example, dealing with mental health issues, who came on their radar because of some domestic violence issue. And so they flagged it as a follow-up case. And so I'm curious how much of you guys, BPS, is interacting with this new hub model that is happening in East Boston and in JP. And I'm trying to push to see, can we get it in B2, C11, other police districts? But there's real value in the folks sitting around a table. I think they meet weekly. And then even when I left, they were going out to Eggleston for 2 cases of folks dealing with substance abuse, mental health issues as a sort of collective. Best Team was there, other organizations, Elizabeth Stone. So I'm just curious what some of the interaction is with
I can honestly
BPS.
say I'm not 100% familiar with that, but I'm sure Deputy Stratton, those seem to be all the things that he is now responsible for, the mental health, the housing, and the opioid addiction issues. So he's probably definitely involved, and it sounds like it's district-based, which puts it, centrally to the police districts, and all the community service officers have a juvenile officer there, so they would be a resource. They have a great kid that works over in District 7. So, it's the collaboration that the police department does in so many different areas. So it can work.
So this is helpful. Okay.
And our team was just invited this month to be part of the JP team. So
Oh, awesome.
we'll begin to be part
I
of the
just met her
JP
too.
team. Yeah.
So I'll stay in contact with you guys because it was really helpful given the amount of resources at the table. But so many of the cases obviously usually, I think, have a school element. So very helpful.
Yeah.
And clearly aligns, I think, Andrew, with your great work with the collaborative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the BPD and our department have the same we're all working with the same partners to support the same family. So anytime we can come together and problem solve collectively, it's to the benefit of our students.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. One of the things that comes up repeatedly when we talk about school safety is what's happening on the outside of our schools and how that's impacting, whether the students experiencing something in their community, something's happening just outside the school, and how it impacts what's happening inside the school. Last year, we had a group of kids come in from one of the Boys and Girls Clubs, and they talked to, they did these presentations to us as part of their school activity. They talked a lot about their own personal safety and then gun safety in particular. And one of the students had brought up their experience of a shooting that happened just outside the school in which a bullet came through a classroom window. And there was very little conversation or information shared with the kids. And I think there was at some point a parent or a community-based meeting about sort of the incident that led to that, but there was no conversation with the students at that time, and whether it was because the teacher didn't have any information or the teacher didn't know how to appropriately share any information. We don't know, but how does sort of what's happening on the outside get communicated with adults in the building, and then how are we responding?
Do you want to?
Yeah, I can start. So I'm very familiar with the situation you're talking about. That item was found in the morning and didn't transpire while we had students inside the building. However, I can tell you how it normally works. We're assessing with that school leader whatever the incident circumstances are, what has the impact been on your school community. Teacher, staff, exposure, et cetera. It could be graffiti, it could be something like that. It could be something that happened outside that maybe 20 kids saw and the rest of the school doesn't know. So we're very careful about how we vet what a school leader in that community needs. And so there's an operational superintendent, operational leader assigned to every school, and normally operational superintendent, communications, any information that we can or need to share from safety and BPD, we will, to create the most educated picture we can. And I think we also have to balance, how do we message this in a way that is accurate and honest, but not to create any hysteria around a situation that people may react to in a way that we wouldn't want them to. And so that is a process, and we incorporate behavioral health in that messaging and in that conversation when necessary, and that happens on a daily basis at BPS. I think we find out, and I'll just be honest about this, we find out after the fact sometimes that we didn't communicate to certain factions the way that we should or as thoroughly we should, and we'll follow up on that as well.
Well, I think the sharing of information quickly and obviously accurately is really important. But I know with my own kids now, they have cell phones, and so kids are on those phones almost immediately, which can create the hysteria, whether it's real or imagined, that spreads like wildfire, whether it's to parents, it's to other students, it's to other school communities. So that quickness is so important, so critical now.
And we balance that every day, right? So one thing we can't do, and that is part of my role to make sure that we don't do, is to jump to conclusions, to spread inaccurate information, to speak too soon, send out a robocall too soon, label something too soon, no matter what that event could be. So there's a lot of very intelligent, informed people at the table assessing how we do that, what we have, and then when we do that. That being said, I just recently, and I've had it over the past year, conversations with our communications department around, for instance, there was kind of a perfect storm incident in and around School Street in JP last year. We had a police-involved shooting. We had dismissal time at the Hernandez. We had the Mendel down the street. We had Greater Eggleston in the middle, School Street. So the timing was a perfect storm. And the other thing you have to respect in these situations is a school leader needs to control the crisis. And so they can't always run to the table and be like, hey, Kim, or hey, Dan, what do you need me to say? Create a robocall. That's often not the most important thing they need to do. They need to keep the interior of their building safe. They need to control their staff and their kids, and they need to be reassuring everyone. To that end, we've talked about, is it feasible in those types of situations where we do want to get a message out that's accurate, but maybe not very detailed? For instance, the school community is safe. Your school leader we've had an incident, everyone's safe and accounted for. Your school leader will follow up in their own voice in a robocall within the next 3 hours with more detail that's available. And so we're working with communications in those really 3 to 5 incidents per year where we may require that kind of robocall so a parent can sit back and be like, oh, thank goodness, I might run to the school anyway, but I know I don't have to according to this message. So it is a balance, a very difficult balance that we have to weigh every single day around communication.
So the other piece, and sort of shifting the conversation just a little bit, but as critical as it is for me and for all of us to make sure that we're prepared for that serious, significant incident, we have had a rise in the amount of needle exposures our students have had in the playground. And that's sort of one of those outside threats that becomes part of our school community, impacts our kids. Could we talk a little bit about the numbers around the sticks that we've had in this school year or since, over the last year, if you've got any of that information to share? And, I know some things have changed in how we've done operations around keeping school communities safe, but it's fearful for families to even imagine this, and sort of the world has changed again, and it's changed across our city and what we need to face.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me. They're very, very low, and I'd have to check.
To the best of my knowledge, there was one incident last year where a student was stuck with the needle. There was one incident so far this year where a child was stuck with the needle. They're the only two in the last school years that I'm aware of. That we can confirm that and get that
Can you tell me
information back to you.
the two schools?
Orchard Gardens and Quincy Elementary.
All right, so I know of one at the Mason and one at the Russell School. And the Russell School one, I reported myself because we were reached out by a constituent. It didn't happen in the schoolyard, but it happened as the kid was crossing the street to go into, get picked up. But to me, that's still a school incident, because we need to be taking care of our kids coming and going to school. So I think that it's really important that we have better data. And I think through the school's incident reports, I don't know if there's a box that we check or some sort of reporting piece so that we have good data when it comes to the needle sticks, because
Yeah, and what I would say too is, forgive me if from time to time I give an answer that I might not have the most up-to-date data. That might be more on me than a reflection of our data systems. What I can say is that we take this matter in particular extremely seriously. We know that this is not just a BPS situation. This is a situation that crosses multiple sectors, multiple departments within the city. We work very closely with the Boston Police Department. We work very closely with the Boston Public Health Commission and with others to make sure that we are, particularly in those trouble areas, doing everything that we can to keep our children and our staff as safe as possible. I know at the Orchard Gardens School and also at the Mason School, we've installed or are installing needle kiosks so as to ensure that needles are deposited in the kiosks rather than just deposited, on the street or on the school property. We also work with our custodial team as well as Boston Public Health Commission to do sweeps of these areas on a regular basis and report the number of needles being collected. We work with our schools and their school staffs to make sure that they are trained on exactly what to do in the event of seeing a needle. We work with them to make sure that their children, that their students know what to do in the event of seeing a needle as well. So we do understand that this is a concern. It's certainly a concern that we share as well, and we're doing everything that we can to address that situation.
I'd love us to, and I don't know whether we are or not, but track that data more accurately. So if a kid, I think that through the nurse's office or through, probably through insurance, but we can probably identify how many kids have been hurt in a playground. They fall and they break an elbow or whatever. But that needle stick, because it is becoming, I think more common, because the opioid crisis is in full effect right now, and we have unfortunately, a lot of active outdoor use, that we have to start tracking that information, because we need to have that data to make better decisions. So I don't know whether it becomes a checkbox in an incident report or something that school communities are filling out. The incident at the Russell School last school year, the information I got from the family was that when the school leader was contacted, they were told to call 311. And that to me is not an appropriate data collection spot. I mean, 311 needs to know that there are needles in a park, but in response to an incident with one of our children, that we just need to know that information. And school leaders need to know what the protocol is, because it is something new. So they may not have the information or the proper response to give. We have to teach them and give them that information so they have tools for their families.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
And again, we may already be tracking that information. I just don't have it at my disposal right now.
Right, great. So if we can use it, I'm happy to share it through my social media. Any additional comments before we move to some more public testimony? Thank you. Thank you for the level of details, been really good, and the quality conversation that we've had today has been very helpful. We do have some members of the Orchard Gardens United group here. I don't know if, Susie, if you're all testifying. You just didn't check the box, but I think you might be wanting to. So if you want to come down, we've got Susie, Jada, and Janina, maybe?
Excuse me, you have some other names on the table?
I do. I'm going to do the first the first page first.
Is this where I should be?
That's where you should
Okay.
be, and we can have somebody over here for testimony next.
Okay.
If you'd like. Or I see that you've maybe got students with you. If you want them to be
Yeah,
with
they're
you,
just
that's
going to
fine.
stand here silently and with their signs. Good afternoon. My name is Susie McClone. I teach sixth grade humanities at Orchard Gardens, and I am a part of Orchard Gardens United, which is a group of students, parents, educators, and community members who are working toward having best experiences for our children at the Orchard Gardens School. So one of the topics that we've become concerned with, and we've been for a while, but it kind of reached a peak in the fall, are the needles that are all around our school. So I know we've been heard by a lot of people in the Boston Public Schools as far as what's happening, and it seems like we have gotten some attention about what the district is going to be doing about this, and maybe the city and the state, because we're not sure, whose responsibility, because it seems like it's a problem that nobody knows how to solve. But anyway, what I really want to talk about are the solutions that we would like to see, and some of the talks that we've been having in Orchard Gardens United. So when we initially were meeting about this, we asked for things such as a fence, for, of course, a comprehensive cleanup of the school grounds, and other things such as having more sharps units on and more frequently. Some of that has happened, and I know like the fence is out for bid, so that's going to be happening. However, some of it doesn't seem like enough, and just for an example, having our custodians go out and do extra work takes them away from our school. I think the Orchard Garden School is meant for 750 students, and now it's past 900, so it's an overfilled school that definitely a custodian needs to be on full-time. So Orchard Gardens United feels that our custodians should not be taking on extra work of the city, especially, with the huge amount of work that they have to do, and that obviously we haven't increased our number of custodians that I know of. So that means they've got more work to do. That isn't even a mess that's created by the students or naturally by most schools in Boston, I don't think. Another piece that we are looking into now is we need to expand our mental health services. At 2 meetings ago, we began to talk about what we had been hearing from students, their experiences, and we believe that we need to have a menu of services for the students who've been affected by the opioid crisis. I walk to the school. I live less than a mile away, and I know when I walk there around 6:30 in the morning, I see things that I shouldn't be seeing, and I know that kids who live within a mile have to walk to school, and there are things that children definitely should not be seeing. And I see all kinds of things. I see prostitution, I see drug use, and this is on a regular basis because I do walk up Mass Ave and then down Northampton and then to Albany. So with that, I can't imagine being a young student at our school and what that does to one. I don't know, and so that's why we are going to look into getting a study grant for mental health services, and we would like to see more creative solutions for mental health services, such as having services that are, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if these have been invented because mental health isn't my thing, but services that come in a variety of ways for students or people who've been affected by environmental racism, which is the only thing I can call what's going on by our school. So we would like to see those services also provided by more people who look like our students and have come through experiences like that. So we are asking for the City Council to consider, please, more support for us for mental health services, because I don't think that is something that everybody's considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie, for your testimony. Next, we have Jada. Would you like to introduce yourself and maybe tell us what school you come from, maybe what grade you're in before you read your testimony?
First, I would like to thank you for inviting us to speak today. Hi, my name is Jada Rackard. I'm 10 years old, and I go to Orchard Gardens Pilot School, and I am in the 5th grade. On December 19th, I spoke at the school committee meeting with my mom. I talked about the many needles and all around at my school. I spoke about how afraid I was. Me and my friends can't even go to the field next to my school anymore to play because it's unsafe. We are afraid that we might get pricked by a needle. I also told them that I was scared of the people walking around and that they look like they're sleeping standing up. I told them that my mom said it was my job to go to school and get an education, but I believe it was their job to give me an education and keep me safe. My mom and a few other parents demanded a few things to be done to the school playground. This month, I went to a town meeting, and all they talked about was what services they were going to provide for the drug addicts. They didn't say anything about what they were going to do for us, so I asked them, what services are you going to provide for me and my friends? What are you going to do for all the kids that are afraid, the ones that walk to school every day and have to see the needles on the ground or the drug addicts? No one has answered any of my questions, and I'm tired. So now it's time for me to demand a few things. I am demanding that you keep us safe. I am demanding that you hire someone to clean our school grounds daily. I am demanding that there is police at the school in the morning and afternoon. I don't think that our safety is too much to ask for. Once you were my age, and now you're all grown up, I would like to respectfully remind you that I might be young now, but one day I will grow up to be your future. Thank you.
Jada, thank you very much. And Janina?
That's hard to go behind.
That's so hard to go after. You did a great job, Jada.
My name is Janina Rackard. That young lady is my daughter. And I am a part of Orchard Gardens United. I think a lot of things Susie already addressed. She addressed that we asked for a couple of things to happen at the school. In November, I received a text from my daughter, and it said, "Mommy, I'm scared." You know, when you hear that your child is scared, it brings a different light to you. And I asked her for what. I immediately picked up the phone and I called her. And she explained that a child got pricked at the school and that there were so many needles on the playground that they couldn't go and play. With that being said, I decided to get involved. I decided to link up with Orchard Gardens United. There has been, us parents do our own daily walk. We have asked, and I don't believe that it is too much that we've asked for. We've asked for, the mulch to be picked up on the school grounds. We received messages that soon as the snow goes away, it's winter out, but the kids are still outside. We've asked that the playground structure be washed. We received the message that there is now a power washing machine at the school now, and it will stay there, and the custodian, who also has to clean every single room in that classroom, is now going to be doing 3 times a day sweeps. Is it fair to them? No. When we checked and did our own walk, the power wash wasn't significant enough. We believe that there needs to be somebody there that is legally bound to clean that structure that is actually contaminated. We asked that they clean the field that's in the back, because underneath that area where all the mulch and all, where they have footballs, is bleachers where they urinate on, and the kids have to go back there to play. They're not allowed anymore to go back there and play, which is really unfortunate for them. My daughter didn't speak about it, but she was sitting on the bleachers and she saw tons of needles underneath it, and she says, "I'm leaving." Since all these, we asked for a fence, and to this, we were told by May that it would be up and done, but the bid hasn't even gone in yet. We also said that we would get the fence donated. we were told we can't do that because there's, I don't know, because there's ways that we have to, and I understand, I get all this, I understand all that, but this is an emergency purposes. And soon as it's going to be warm out, and the kids are going to be going back outside on that playground structure where people are sleeping and actually urinating on, and actually leaving their needles underneath the playground structure to hide them. We are doing our own sweeps, and we are finding several needles a day. But yet we're being told that there is Parks and Recreation coming by. We know that they're not doing enough. And we know that they have not hired enough people to do that. There's 4 for the whole district. That is not enough. So, you know, on top of all that, I think Susie also talked about the mental health piece. My daughter, we live right in the South End. When I get off that highway or wherever I go, getting off that highway, going down Molina Castle, whether I'm going down Massachusetts Ave, Mass Ave, she starts screaming, lock the doors, Mommy, lock the doors. And I'm saying, JD, you're all right, you're in the car, you're safe. No, Mommy, lock the doors, they're gonna get us. That is traumatizing. So now I have to deal with that. Now that I gotta retrain my own child to know that she is in a safe environment. We can't sit outside anymore of our own stairs because they are walking by, going to Mass Ave, and they are talking to her. It's not safe. So I guess we're here today and we're asking for your help. We're asking for help to keep our children safe. We're asking for help. We understand that this is a big issue. It's a big and broad issue, but the kids didn't ask for it, and it's not fair to them. She's been there since kindergarten, and now I'm having a conversation with her about it's time to leave. And she's telling me, yes, I want to go. That's not fair. Thank you for listening to us today, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Janita. Then we also have Domingos DeRosa and Lewis. I can't read the last name.
And then Ileana actually wanted to speak
Oh,
on
sure.
behalf of the students at Orchard Garden, so she could be added. Ileana.
Ileana, so if you would go after Domingos, please. You can
Hi.
come to this microphone when you're ready. It's on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for holding this hearing. My name is Domingos DeRosa. I'm also a part of the Orchard Garden United. I'm also a community activist. I also run programs in the neighborhood for the kids that live within that Roxbury-Dorchester line. We've presented this issue to the school department. We've presented this issue to the police department, the health commission, and every other department within the city. And the same answers are being given to us over and over and over again, that the city is doing as much as they can. We who deal with this every day, who take our time out of our days to come out and pick up needles before the kids go to school, while they're at school, and when they're away from school, it's becoming tiring to the community itself. This is a public safety issue. These children who attend BPS shouldn't have to also deal with issues that are causing other effects to their mental health, to their day-to-day functions. These kids already come from a stressful environment. They live in some of the parts of the city that most people refuse to be members of. So today we're here to ask for more services, to include in your school department a group of staff members who are actually going to come out and make sure not only Orchard Gardens, the Mason School, the Blackstone, and any other school within a 2-mile radius from the methadone mile, to have the service to make sure that these needles are properly disposed. It's not fair that these children are confined to the school because the play structures are contaminated with all sorts of things. We only speak about a few different things when it comes to the needles. Just picking a needle up, you can get hepatitis. These children sometimes don't know the difference between a dirty needle and a clean needle. We educate our children from a young age that needles are good for you, right? You go to the doctor, you get a shot, it's a good needle. Don't cry, it's good for you. The doctor's gonna help you, it's gonna make you better. So what are we gonna tell that to a group of autistic kids who attends the Orchard Garden School, who has this idea that needles are good for you, and all they wanna do is play doctors? Are we gonna wait till another kid gets pricked? I sat here and I listened to some of your testimonies, and not to have a running log of how many students have been affected by this, it's very disheartening. This is not new to the BPS. This isn't the first time that a child has been pricked with a needle. This is probably the 12th or more times. We've had this issue for the last 4 years, all over the news, all over the medias, and not to have a team of staff members who are going to be responsible to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. We just came back from February break. One of the members of the Orchard Garden United took her time, went to the school. That Monday morning, she collected herself 20 or so needles. She found all sorts of things in the play structures, from feces, condoms, needles, alcohol bottles, and so forth. Ask yourself, if this was your child's school, would you continue to allow that in the position that you hold? Would you continue to allow these children to be fearful of their safety? Would you continue to allow these children to go through trauma day in, day out? It's one thing to see it in the movies. It's another thing to see it in day-to-day. Take 10 minutes out your day and come down to Orchard Garden and spend half an hour and see what these kids are looking out of the window and seeing. And then you go back home and you tell me how you feel if that was your child sitting in that classroom looking out the window and all they see is prostitution and drug use. Yes, we understand it's a bigger issue that the city has to deal with. But at the same time, it doesn't take 4 months to put a fence up. There's ways to get around the red tape. If this was a safety issue, which it is, and should be at the top of your list, that fence should have been up a month ago. There's no reason why that the safety of these children are being played with through the politics of the city. And we should be embarrassed of having a city like Boston with all the resources not able to give these children of 900 plus, and again, it's not just the Orchard Gardens, it's the Mason School, it's the Blackstone. Folks who are doing this day in, day out, we have more than enough footage. We have more than enough needles. We have more than enough evidence to support our argument of the negligence that's being done to these children. I'll close by saying, no one wants to see anyone get hurt. That's the last thing we want to see. But at the end of the day, when we don't say something that we see is wrong, we are just as bad as the person who's leaving the needles behind. We've watched countless staff members neglect their duties. We've watched countless individuals brush us aside. We're not going to sit back and continue to be ignored. We will make sure that our concerns are heard on every platform that we can take this matter to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ileana, right? Would you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Ileana Pimentel, and I am from Orchard Gardens Pilot School. And I am here to talk about the needles on my school and around where I live. Every morning, I have to walk with my little brother to the school from Dudley. And sometimes when I found about the kid getting pricked, I told my mother, and I was scared to go to school the next day because I was also scared for my little brother because he has to play on that same playground that little boy got pricked by. And sometimes when, like, my brother went on a field trip and it was overnight, I was scared to go to school myself. So I stayed home because I lived there for so long, and I have this playground in my backyard, and I can't even play there no more because every time I go outside, I have to play in my little fenced backyard because there's always someone sleeping there or doing something there. Or I'm scared if I throw away the trash that someone's gonna touch me or do something that is, like, it's just crazy to think about. Like, I can't even go outside in my own backyard, throw away the trash, do what normal kids my age are supposed to be doing. I have to stay in my house locked with the doors locked. And I couldn't even trust when my door's unlocked or wide open when people are outside because my mom, she used to work night shifts, and I got scared that if the door was unlocked, that someone would try to come in or try to steal something, or that my mom would get hit by a drunk driver while she was driving home from work. And when they were talking about the field, my friend, Jessica, she lives literally across the street from there, and every morning we walk from her house to school, passing that field. Once we were in that little basketball court, and there was a man, I remember there was a circle thing that kids used to crawl through, but we can't go there no more. He was sleeping in there, and I was just scared that if he woke up and he saw us there, that he would do something. And we couldn't do nothing because our school says, oh, don't touch this, don't touch that. We shouldn't even be seeing that type of stuff. Our school should be taking care of that stuff. And I know that they're trying, but I was at the bowling building in December talking about the same thing, and they didn't give me a response. I guess it's because I'm a child, but they gave the adults a response. Why couldn't I get a response? That doesn't seem fair to me.
That does not seem fair. Thank you, Ileana, for your testimony today.
Have more public testimony. We would love the opportunity to respond to Ileana, to Jada, to others. We can wait until testimony is completed if you'd like, or we can deliver a response.
You can give a response now. We have, I think, Teresa still left to testify. Is Teresa here? And then we have, I think it's Lewis. Whoever signed in after Domingos. No, okay, so just Teresa. So let's have Teresa, she's the last for public testimony, and then we'll have a response and closing.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Teresa Albert DeJesus. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm a great-grandmother. I have a 9-year-old at the Orchard Garden School. My concern, I want to piggyback on my colleagues, and I am a member of the Orchard Garden United. I want to piggyback on those who've spoken before me. One of my concerns, as well as all the concerns that we've heard, is when, and I do appreciate what the officer said as well, as crime somewhat has gone down. But when you're in a situation where you're constantly hearing a gunfire, the situation isn't getting any better. If someone gets hit or someone does not get hit, these children are listening to this gunfire. Now, there's been several incidents in the Orchard Garden area, the community, where gunfire during the daytime is prevalent. My concern is in other schools, a lot of other schools, when there are situations like this, they do have counselors, social workers, going into the school and talking to the children so that the children can understand what's going on in their community somewhat. But at least if there is an act of shooting in the community, at least notify the school. There are 2 schools, and there's the Boys and Girls Club as well with a lot of children. Notify the adults in the school of what's going on. There's been a shooting. Parents are coming to pick up their children. Parents don't know this, but the children know, Mom, somebody's out here shooting. They have no means that I know of where when situations of this sort, that counselors may come into the school and explain to the children. Counselors may explain to the children of why you might see a person walking down the street and they look like they're sleeping, or why somebody's walking and have a needle in their arm. Let the children understand. Let a professional come in and let our children understand what's going on around in their community. And I would like to see the schools and the Boys and Girls Club notified if there is a shooting in the general close area, proximity of the schools or the Boys and Girls Club. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, very much. Chief Hanlon.
Sure. Thank you very much, Counselor. I'm actually going to pass things over to Rob Consalvo, our Chief of Staff, who's been working on this. Obviously, within Operations and Safety Services, we've done a lot to respond to some of these incidents, some of which occurred after Jada's testimony to school committee back in December. But because this is a cross-sector, multi-department effort, I think Rob is actually best suited to issue a response and provide some clarification for both City Council and those who provided the compelling testimony we've heard so far.
Great, thank you. Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to be back in the old seat.
It's my seat now.
I know. I had it for this exact spot for about 8 years. So anyway, no, I'm glad to be here just to talk about some efforts that we're undertaking around Orchard Gardens as well as the Mason School. I do want to thank Orchard Gardens United. They have been a constant advocate for Orchard Gardens, our students and our families and our surrounding property. And I want to thank them for their advocacy. Their advocacy is actually driving, Counselor, a lot of the changes we're going to make at the Orchard Gardens. They are correct that they send correspondence to us, and I think you supported that correspondence, Madam Chair, with a letter articulating the very same points of a series of steps that they would like to see the school department take from an operations perspective to address some of the issues around Orchard Gardens. And I'm happy to say today that each and everything that was requested by Orchard Gardens United and yourself in that letter is something that the district is prepared to do, because we agree with them that those steps that they've highlighted we need to take to try to help address some of the operational issues around Orchard Gardens. So what are they and what are we doing in response? We are in the process of installing a fence. Currently now, the length of the Melnia Cass Orchard Gardens property has a 5-foot sort of decorative cast iron fence. I want to also remind folks just how far that is. If you actually go and walk the site, it's a rather long piece of fence. There's also fencing in between the scrap metal yard and the school property that also runs for an extensive long length that is not as decorative. It's a mishmash of the scrap metal junkyards fence and Boston Public School fence. We are going to replace the entire length of the fence along Melnia Cass, as well as the entire length separating our property and the property of the scrap metal yard, with a 8-foot high decorative sort of wrought iron fence, both along Melnia Cass as well as in between the property of the scrap metal yard and our property. We will also install fencing in between. So not only will we run fence in between the two properties, Counselor, we will run a fence in between our building and their property to prohibit future access into that site from the back of the site. And we're doing that because we believe it'll help prevent trespassing, and we know the cut-through traffic that takes place, that folks are utilizing our property to cut through to the back of the park and the back of the school. That project is out to bid. It went out to bid in January. We have to follow public procurement law. It's not as easy as just throwing up a fence. And if you go look at the length of the fencing we're actually putting up and the scope of a job, we're not putting up temporary fencing to address it. We're putting up permanent fencing. We don't want the school to look like a prison, so it's not going to just be chain link fence with razor wire, but it's going to be the decorative fence that is really mimicked all along Melnia Cass stretch by other properties that have that decorative fence. We have to follow procurement law. There's no way around it. If we could make the procurement law go quicker, we would most certainly do it. The procurement law is triggered by a threshold, and John, I believe it's $50,000, that any job over $50,000 has to follow the public procurement process. Because of the scope of the fencing we are doing, this job is well over the $50,000 threshold. So we're going to follow the procurement law as we're required to do, as we do with all of our publicly bidded projects. But I assure the public that we are more than halfway through that process, and we will see as construction starting on that very soon. Some of the other things we heard were, can we have more regular sweeps by the custodians and actually log those sweeps? Our custodial team does an amazing job at not just this school, but every school around the district. The maintenance of the grounds outside the building are part of their responsibility, whether there are needles or not. The custodians at the Orchard Gardens welcomed and are glad to, as part of their regular maintenance, conduct more frequent sweeps. So now we have established sweeps of at 7 a.m., 9:30, and 1:30 before school is dismissed, in addition to other regular times folks are out addressing the issue. These 3 regular sweeps are logged at the request of the community, and that log is kept in the principal's office, where we now log exactly what the custodians found as was requested. One of the things we also added at Orchard Gardens was we have a citywide grounds crew. That's a team of custodians that roam the city, for lack of a better term, handling citywide custodial issues at schools all around the district. That custodial crew will begin every Monday morning at Orchard Gardens to help sweep for the following weekend, the preceding weekend rather, meaning because we know we don't have custodial staff on weekends, that citywide grounds crew starts every Monday morning sweeping the premises even before the custodians or anyone gets to the school to address issues that may have occurred over the weekend. That began on December 31st and has happened every Monday since then. We were asked to improve the lighting at the Orchard Gardens. That happened immediately, and the lighting, working with the school leader and their board of governors and others, has happened, and we've addressed the lighting appropriately around the building. We know the custodial staff all around the district has been trained on the SHOPS procedures, but at the request of the community, we made sure that all of the staff and personnel who work with students outside the building were trained. I attended that training. I think you might have even been there as well when we had the training at the school. I'm not sure, but we did have that training out for sort of the cafeteria staff and other teacher staff that go well with students out into the playground. So now they are SHOPS trained as well to be able to address the SHOPS issues that they find. It is correct that the power washing equipment is at the Orchard Gardens, and it will remain there for the foreseeable future. That was a request of the community as well as the custodial staff, who wanted to be able, when they need to, use that power washing equipment to wash off the playground equipment that's on our property, should there be issues with people sleeping there and other things around bodily fluids, fecal matter, that kind of stuff. And so now we have a power washing equipment there. That staff will use it whenever they need to make sure that that playground equipment is safe and sanitary. We also obviously do regular maintenance and cleaning of the grounds seasonally and otherwise, and that will also continue. So we agree that continuing to do the mulch and sweeps around the property, that stuff has to happen to make sure that we're addressing that. So a lot of things happening at the Orchard Gardens and stuff that we need to do. That is a proactive effort working with the community. Like I said, things that we've heard the community say they want done, including we're going to be adding another kiosk, working with the school leadership, the custodial staff, and others. We are installing. That is also out to bid, a much quicker process, though. That kiosk will be put on the Melnia Cast side of the property near the parking lot, facing the sidewalk, so that it has access to folks who might be trespassing in our parking lot or as well as on the sidewalk. We think that the reality is the kiosks are used by a variety of users, both drug users and concerned citizens and custodial staff. It's a safe place to deposit SHOPS materials, and we know they are used. The data shows that. So the Boston Public Health Commission's Office of Recovery Services will maintain and empty those under an existing contract for us, so we won't have to worry about doing that. The Mason School will also get a kiosk. We've worked with the school leader and her team in the Parks Department, and we will be placing another kiosk at the Mason School as well. Those are both ordered. The company will be any day now pouring the cement pad. Once that cement pad, they had to wait till the weather wasn't freezing temperatures to pour the cement, but any day now they'll be outpouring that pad. Once that pad cures, they will install that kiosk at both the Mason and Orchard Gardens. And just closing on the Mason School, we also are today, our operations staff was out there to increase lighting around the school as requested at last week's Clifford Park community meeting. So there'll be new lighting around that building effective today or when the job is finished. And our custodial and operations team are out assessing the property at the request of individuals from that community meeting about landscaping, bushes, other issues that may be causing problems, hiding places, or other things at the school. We're going to make, working with the school leader, of course, and her staff and custodial staff, those necessary changes as well at that school. So those are some of the steps that we're taking. Each and every one that I mentioned are all the requests that were made by Orchard Garden United. And again, want to thank them for continuing to be advocates and continuing to make sure we're following through, continuing to ask questions around how long the bid is, when is it going to get done. The fact of the matter is the things that you heard me talk about today and that we've repeated consistently at community meetings are all on those list of action items that we were asked to do. We are going to complete them all. Those are a series of steps that we'll take. They're not the only steps. We will continue to work with the Boston Police Department, the Mayor's Office of Recovery Services, with Orchard Gardens United, and with any and all other community groups who have ideas about how we should be making operational changes around our schools. And I will also say we'll be working very closely with the school parents, with the governing boards, with the parents' councils, all of the folks who have a voice at these schools. We welcome their feedback. We welcome their suggestions and ideas. And we, from an operations perspective, will make the necessary changes we have to, like you will see at Orchard Gardens happening very soon, to keep all of our schools safe. I say it every time I'm at a public hearing. I am a parent of 3 Boston Public School students. Counselor, I know you are, I know John Hanlon is, I know Andrea is. We don't just work at the Boston Public Schools, we also send our children to the Boston Public Schools. So this is an issue we care about very deeply. We care about making sure our kids, not just at my kids' school, are safe, but at schools all around the district. And we really care and understand and appreciate the importance of parent, community, and school voice in helping us make these necessary decisions.
Thank you, Rob.
Counselor, I apologize. Just a very brief update. The bids for the fence come in on the 28th, which is this Thursday, and we expect the fence to be in place by the beginning of May.
Thank you for that update. Give me a moment if you want to wait at the mic. I just want to introduce, we've been joined by Councilor Edwards. I don't know if you've got any comments before. We have one more bit of public testimony, and I'll do closing remarks.
Great. Thank you so much for coming. I apologize for being late. We were dealing with some dispensary fun on the 8th floor for most of the day. But I wanted to first commend you on your work last year. I remember I was first on the council. It was my first time, and school safety came up in East Boston specifically because of the gun incident. And it came up during the budget season, and I had asked about standards to be set, how we're going to measure them, how do we assure that. And sure enough, by the next hearing, you had all of those things set to say how we're going to measure school safety and look at all of those things. And I'm sure when we're going through the bigger budget kind of discussions, that'll come up again. So I wanted to say thank you for that work. I did want to talk a little bit about how you relate or see the lack of school nurses and school student safety being connected. Specifically, I'm looking at the statistic about 302 suicide risk assessments that your crisis data is showing. So how, I'm sure someone caught those things, but if you're finding that we don't have a nurse in every school or a full-time nurse in every school, if there's suicide issues or suicide prevention, because that's a safety issue as well, how are we making sure that we're catching those kids at risk?
Andrea, you might want to respond to that. Given that this is a behavioral health situation that you're referring to, Councilor Edwards, and there has been a dramatic increase in the number of supports in that area over the last few years, in particular an investment in school-based psychologists over the last year. It might be worthwhile, Andrea, you responding.
Sure. So again, we thank the mayor for giving us additional positions in our Department of Behavioral Health Services. You asked specifically how we're finding kids that are suicidal. So I would say there's many ways. One of them,
specifically also with that we don't have a full-time nurse in each school, but you're
so I
answering.
can speak about behavioral health, and then I'll turn it to John for nurses. So in the behavioral health department, one of the things we do is work with high schools to use SOS, signs of suicide, and Break Free from Depression. Both are curriculum that pair well together at high school to make students aware of suicide risk factors, who to turn to for help, and how depression and suicide are linked. Those are high school programs. SOS can also be used in the middle school. So that's one initiative, and Sandy Hook Promise is helping us increase the amount of SOS trainings that we can do. Another thing, as you see from our numbers, all of the behavioral health services staff have been trained in risk assessment, both threat and suicide, so that they're prepared to support students at school. 69 schools are in the comprehensive behavioral health model. As part of that model, we do a universal behavioral health screening. So this year, we've screened 27,000 students, and that looks at both internalizing issues and externalizing issues, so we're able to find students that need help and get them help faster. We also, every school has a student support team, so if a student, if a teacher is concerned about a student, they refer the student to student support. Some of the schools, as I mentioned, have mental health partners or BPS staff that the student can be referred to. Others are being referred through their primary care to get mental health services. So that's particularly about mental health. And then do you want to talk about nurses, or?
I actually don't have much to add in terms of the nurses. Again, this is much more of a behavioral health issue. I mean, certainly when we have nurses in buildings and they can assist with this, but typically, if not always, they're referred to behavioral health specialists to actually assist with this. And when the case arises, we have EMS come to the school and transport students to the proper facilities to be able to really provide them the resources that they need beyond what we can actually provide at schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Teresa, if you don't mind being brief. Very brief. Thank you.
I just want to address some of the issues that Rob did bring up regarding our list of things we would like done with Orchard Gardens. One is, I've spoke to Rob a couple of times, but we asked for a seat at the table. We have not yet got that. We've asked to be involved with anything that was on the list so that we can have a good time schedule and a timely manner of what's going to be done. You know, about the kiosks, we actually asked for the kiosk to be removed. And now we're hearing that there's a second kiosk being put there. The kiosk is actually like 10 steps away from the playground. Although it is not on the school grounds, the kiosk is a sore eye, it is red, and it is not being utilized correctly. We are still finding needles. I have pictures that parents have sent me just yesterday of needles on that property. And the needles are literally as through that walkway where the children have to walk. So that's why we are asking for that kiosk to be removed. And then we're hearing that this is the second one being put there. We're hearing that, and we didn't have no say-so in this. We didn't hear about it until they had a walkthrough with the committee, the board. And we don't mind the kiosk being between Morgan Memorial and the parking structure of where the teachers park. But having it right there where the children will see is not acceptable. That is just not. And then for the other kiosk to be right on the outside of the playground, it is not acceptable. It is not being used. So why are we adding another one? So the main thing that I'm really kind of frustrated with is that I asked for a seat at the table. You know, I am one of the main speakers for Orchard Gardens United. We just asked for, and we do conversate with the principal. And I got the list of demands that he said that was going to be addressed. The fencing, we're hearing now they're expanding that fencing. We didn't know that. And we would not be discussing this. I understand that there is a time restraint to everything, and there's procedures that we have to go through. But this is an emergency purpose. And if it is an emergency purpose, I know that there's other things that we can do and play. We're asking for someone to be there. No reason why the Boys and Girls Club should have to come outside. The gentleman from the Boys and Girls Club that runs the Boys and Girls Club, come outside and shoo these people away from our children that are playing 5 feet from them. So these are just things I would like to address. And because I actually just don't want it to look like we're still pushing for things that we understand that is going to get done. We are asking, and we're trying to be really reasonable about it, but we are asking for these things and to have a seat at the table so we can all discuss it, and I can bring it back to Orchard Gardens United. Me or Susie can bring it back to Orchard Gardens United, and then it doesn't have to be a third party. Thank you.
Thank you, Janina. So I thank you all for being here today. I think the conversation around school safety certainly encompasses a lot, whether it's the active shooter training and making sure that we've got the pieces in place should there be a large-scale incident, that the preventative work is happening, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's every school has a full-time nurse on staff. It's the cyberbullying piece, which we didn't really talk about today. And it's also making sure that as we proceed with Build BPS, that we're thinking about these pieces in any future redesign of any of our school buildings, because that's so important. So, you know, I really appreciate the presentations today and the thoroughness of the presentation, and I think it's very clear that it's multiple partners that need to be involved in this work, you know, city agencies, community members, certainly the police department, our behavioral health support folks, and then our families and our community members, no doubt. So I, again, appreciate your presentation, your participation today, and that of the public. This meeting is adjourned.